In this video, I'll be going over the solutions for the nonlinear mini test revision. For this particular video here, I'm not going to be showing you full working out. However, I am expecting that you have some understanding and can actually get to some of the steps that I will be showing you. So the first question that I'll be giving you are questions relating to expansion. And remember, when you're expanding, you are required to use the for method. So what that means is you need to first multiply the first terms within each of the brackets. Then you multiply by the outer terms, then the inner terms, and then followed, you're going to be multiplying by the last terms. Okay, so if you were successfully using the for method for the first one, this is what you should get. You should get four terms because you are doing four different steps, F, O, I, and then L, and then you recognize that there are like terms here, so therefore you just add this 10x plus 6x, therefore that gives you 16x. If you did the second one correctly, then you should get 10x squared plus 30x minus 12x minus 36. These are like terms, 30x minus 12x, that gives you 18x. For the next one over here, this is an example of a perfect square, okay? So you could write this as 2x plus 3 multiplied by 2x plus 3. That's essentially what it means. So therefore, use the for method again, and therefore collect the like terms. Hence, this would be your correct answer. Now, for part D and for part E, it's really critical that you actually use a for method for this first, and then once you obtain the answer, then expand it with the 2 outside, okay? So if you were to expand it successfully using the for method, this is what you get. Now collect the like terms over here, 5x plus 18x equals to 23x, and once you've simplified it, then you can actually start expanding it. So therefore, this would be your final answer. You do the exact same thing for part A as well, so use a for method. This is what you'd get. Negative 5x plus 4x is going to give you negative 1x, and therefore multiply the negative 4 outside, and therefore this is going to be your final answer. Just making sure that you change these to positive because two negatives makes a positive. So the next set of questions that I'm asking ask you to factorize the following expressions, but notice over here, in order for you to factorize these sorts of questions, all you're essentially doing is factorizing by finding the highest common factor, and this should always be the go-to regardless of what equations you're going to be getting. So if we're looking for the very first example over here, the highest common factor is going to be 9x. Okay, so therefore if you're going to factorize it, then this would be your final answer. For this particular question, you really don't need to show any working out whatsoever, just the final answer will be sufficient. For the next one over here, what is the highest common factor between 6x and 24x squared? This will be 6x, so therefore this would be your answer over here. And for the very last question, the highest common factor is going to be 3x, so therefore this would be your answer. The next set of questions will ask you to factorize these questions over here, and it's really important that you recognize that for these ones over here, these are examples of differences of perfect squares, or DOPS as the acronym, okay? And the way that you can kind of recognize it is that generally speaking, you will have two perfect squares and there is going to be a subtraction sign in between as shown by these ones. But whenever you're tackling these questions, what it is really important for you to do is that if there is a highest common factor present, factorize that first before you actually factorize it as a difference of perfect square. So for the very first example over here, you're going to need to find the values of a and b and then plug it into this particular formula over here. So therefore, your a squared in this case is equal to 4x squared, and your b squared value is equal to positive 9. To find the individual values of a and b respectively, just take the square root of both sides of the equation. Hence, a becomes 2x and b is equal to positive 3, and then plug it into this formula. So therefore, your final answer would be 2x plus 3, 2x minus 3. For the second equation over here, I can immediately see that there is a common factor. 2 is a common factor, so I'm going to partially factorize this first. So therefore, this is what my equation would now look like. And once I've done that, then I can kind of like, for now, just ignore this and factorize this as a DOP. So therefore, my a squared is equal to x squared, and my b squared is equal to 16, square root both sides. So therefore, a is equal to x, b is equal to 4, and hence this is going to be your final answer, making sure that you do include a 2 in front. For the next set of questions, your highest common factor is going to be 3. So therefore, this would be what your equation would look like after you take the 3 outside and do the exact same process. Hence, this should be your final answer. For these sets of questions over here, there is a common binomial term found in each of these expressions, okay? So you can really identify that this are the common binomial term. The reason why it's binomial is because there are two things that consist or make up that particular term over here. And the way that we did that was that I usually generally let a letter, whether that is Z, A, B, doesn't really matter at all, to one of those binomial terms. So for instance, for this one over here, I'm going to let A is equal to X minus 3. And if you were properly doing the working out, then you would therefore substitute X minus 3 as A. So that's why I've got 5XA plus 2A. And then what you would do is then you would factorize this. So by taking A outside and therefore reinserting X minus 3 as A back into this equation of here. Hence, this would be your final answer, okay? Now, if this was a short answer question, then and if it was worth 1 mark, then you would only really need to give me the answer. But if it was a 2-mark question, then you would need to show me a few steps. Perhaps this step over here or this step over here and then the final answer. So for the next question, again, I'm going to let A is equal to X plus 5. And then once I'm going to do that, I'm going to take out the highest common factor. Once I take out the highest common factor, I reinsert A as X plus 5, and therefore this will be my final answer. Do the exact same thing for part C. So therefore, in this case, you should get an answer of 5X plus 3y, 2 minus z. And for the very last question, this is a bit different slightly. So you still do the exact same process again. So therefore, if you do that, let PQ plus 1 is equal to A. Again, same process, but generally speaking, look at all these other examples. Generally, your common binomial term was your highest common factor, but in this example of here, the highest common factor in this case is going to be equal to 3A. So if you take 3A outside, then reinsert A, then this should be your final answer, okay? Now, if you didn't actually take out the highest common factor, then your answer would be a bit different. Your answer would have been instead PQ plus 1 and 15 plus 3R. And that would have been your answer. However, this is only partially correct because, as you can see, there's still a common factor inside over here, which you have to take into consideration as well. For the next set of questions, these should be relatively easy for you guys by now. And you have to factorize using the product sum method. So find two multiples two factors that give you the last term. So in this case, 66, but adds up to negative 17. In this example of here, it's going to be negative 11 and negative 6. And if you add these two numbers together, that will give you negative 17. So in this case, you will just insert it into the formula. Remember that the formula was this over here. And that was all you had to do. For the second one, find two factors multiplied that gives you 21 but adds up to negative 4. In this case, it'll be negative 7 and 3. Hence, this would be your answer. For the very last one, two numbers multiplied with each other that gives you negative 8 is going to be positive 4 and negative 2. Because if you add 4 and negative 2, that will also give you positive 2. Hence, this should be your answer. For this question over here, this is a bit different, still the same content. However, in this case over here, you've got an A value that's not equal to 1. And in these examples over here, you should always be taking out the highest common factor. So if you take out the highest common factor, then in this case, which in this case is going to be 4, then you do the exact same process where you find factors of 5 that adds up to negative 4. In this case over here, it's going to be negative 5 and positive 1. Therefore, this would be your answer. For the second question, take out the 2 as the highest common factor and then find two numbers multiplied with each other that gives you 24 but adds up to 11. That's going to be 8 and 3. Hence, this would be your final answer. And for the very last one, 3 is the highest common factor. Two numbers that multiply each other that gives you 9 but adds up to negative 8 is going to be positive 1 and negative 9. Therefore, this is going to be your answer. All right, we're now finally answering the application type questions, and these questions are going to be really similar to the ones that you'll be encountering. Now, for these types of questions, it's really important that you first start off by defining what the variables are. So what does X or Y or whatever letter you use represent? In this case over here, it tells you that the width of a rectangle is 3 centimeters less than its length, okay? So in this case, we don't know what the length is, so let's define our length as X, as our unknown. And know that now that we know what the length is, right, we can therefore write an equation for what the width represents. So therefore, the width is going to be X minus 3 because it says the width is 3 less than its length, okay? Now, once you've done that, I generally draw a diagram because it makes it a little bit more easier for me so I can kind of visualize it. The question says, if the area of the rectangle is 40 centimeters squared, find the length and width. So essentially finding the dimensions. So in this case over here, let's write an equation that relates length and width to area. We know that for a rectangle, area is found as length times width. So I'm just going to be substituting what I know for my length and width into the equation. So therefore it'll be x multiplied by x minus 3, right? And we know that the area is also equal to 40, so I can therefore substitute this as 40 over here. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be solving for x. Whenever you're solving for x, remember you're trying to get one side equal to 0, and once you get one side equal to 0, then you can start factorizing, use null factor law, that kind of stuff. So in this case over here, I'm going to first expand it, and then I'm going to move 40 to the other side so that I can have 0 to one side. And remember, the reason why we want 0 is so that we can then use our null factor law. So let's first factorize and then use null factor. So in this particular example over here, two numbers multiplied with each other gives you negative 40, but adds up to negative 3 is going to be negative 8 and positive 5. So therefore, if you put that in, this should be what you get for your factorized form. Then use null factor law, okay? So therefore, if you use null factor law, it should be x is equal to negative 5 or x is equal to positive 8. This is the key important part that you need to understand. Now, in this context, this is an application question. And in this case, remember that your length represents length. In this case over here, you have to ask yourself, because you've got two possible solutions, could your length be negative 5 centimeters, or could your length be positive 8 centimeters? In this case over here, it makes more sense to have a positive length. Positive length. You can't really have a negative perimeter at all, right? So that's the reason why you discard this solution over here. So negative 5 cannot be a solution at all. So therefore, your length is going to be 8 centimeters, which is what you defined. And therefore, if you want to find out your width, you just insert 8 over here, 8 minus 3, and that is equal to 5 centimeters. One thing that I also want to clarify is that you don't really need to write your answer as like this over here, which you would probably be taught previously. But remember, I just want to remind you guys that you only do this if you're trying to find out the x-intercept, right? So that's more important when you're graphing. This is an application question, and you're not asking to find the x-intercept. You're just trying to find out what the unknown is. So therefore, writing your answer in this form is okay. The next question is very similar as well. So a school is building a rectangular soccer field that has an area of 6,000 square yards. The soccer field must be 40 yards longer than its width. Determine algebraically the length and width. Okay, so in this particular question over here, if you read this particular line, the soccer field must be 40 yards longer than its width. So in this particular case over here, it doesn't actually give us what the width is. So therefore, our unknown is going to be x, let width equal to x. And therefore, this is referring to its length. So our length is going to be x plus 40. Again, I'm going to draw like a rectangle because I'm a visual learner and I just understand things when I have a diagram in front of me. Now that I've got that, I can now relate the length and width to the area formula. So therefore, substitute what you know into the area formula. Again, substitute the area that's been given to you. So therefore, it's going to equal to 6,000. We follow the exact same step again, where we expand and then try to get one side equal to 0, factorize, then use null factor law. So in this case over here, I've expanded. I'm going to move 6,000 onto the left-hand side over here. And once I do that, I'm going to find two numbers multiplied with each other that gives you negative 6,000, but adds up to positive 40. So you will need to do some trial and error because obviously negative 6,000 is not a number that you're familiar with. So just have a go and see which one gives you negative 6,000. But in this case over here, I've got 160, okay, because I know positive 100 multiplied by negative 60 gives you negative 6,000. But if you do find the addition, the sum of that, 100 plus negative 60 will give you positive 40. Use null factor law again. And in this case, you're going to get two solutions. But generally for an application, you always discard one solution because one of them doesn't make sense at all. In this example over here, it's not plausible to have a negative number for your perimeter or width. So therefore, you discard them. And it's always really crucial that you actually write a sentence. So you cannot have a negative solution or a negative perimeter. So therefore, width is going to be 60 yards. Make sure you always include your units. And therefore, your length is going to be 100 yards, where you add 60 plus 40, and that gives you 100. So the very next two application questions that we're going to be looking at is going to be slightly more challenging than the ones that we've already been looking at in previous examples. The question reads, a rectangular garden measuring 12 meters, okay, so that's the width over here, by 16 meters, which is the length, is to have a walkway installed around it, okay? And this walkway has a width of X meters, as you can see over here. Together, the walkway and the garden should have an area of 396 meters squared. So therefore, this entire area over here, which I'm highlighting, has an area of 396. Find the width of the walkway. Now, because they already give us what the area is, it's logical for us to find what is the equation relating the area. We know the area is length times width. So let's find out what is the length and what is the width of this entire thing. In this case over here, we know that this over here is already 16 meters and that this is x meters. So therefore, an equation that relates the length of it is going to be 16 plus 2x because you've got x's on each side. And for the width, it's going to therefore be 12 plus 2x. Now, because I know that area is equal to length times width, I'm just going to substitute the area, the length, and the width into this particular formula. And if you do that, then this is what you should arrive to. My next step is to therefore expand it using the for method. So if you use the for method successfully, then you should get all of these four terms. You will therefore simplify this. 24x plus 32x is going to give you 56x. Now, my next strategy is to therefore solve this, okay? And remember, when you're trying to solve things, let's first try to get 0 on one side of the equation. So let's remove the constant 396 and bring it to the left-hand side. So we'll subtract both sides by 396. And if you do this, therefore, you will get 4x squared plus 56x minus 204 is equal to 0. Now, at this particular stage over here, most people will start to give up. But try to actually factorize this, okay? So firstly, find out what is the highest common factor. And once you find out what the highest common factor is, then you can start using the product sum method, okay? So in this example, the highest common factor is going to be 4. So if you partially factorize this, this is what your equation would now look like. Now, because I'm solving for x, I don't really care about the 4 at all. So I can divide both sides by 4 to get rid of that. So therefore, my new equation is just going to be x squared plus 14x minus 51. I now need to find out what are two numbers multiplied with each other that gives you negative 51 and 14. So there might be a bit of trial and error because 51 is not a number that you're familiar with. But if you've done this successfully, it's going to be 17 and 3. More specifically, positive 17 and negative 3. So therefore, this is what your factorized equation would now look like. I'm now going to be using the null factor law. And if I do this, I'll get negative 17 and positive 3. In this example up here, you can't have a negative width because x represents the walkway, sorry. So therefore, in this case over here, the width is going to be 3 meters, okay? And again, make sure you're using the correct units. For the very last example that we're going to be looking at, it reads an engineer's diagram of a rectangle is shown over here. If the total area of a surface shown is 63 centimeters squared, find the value of x. So in this case over here, they give us the area of the entire thing. Again, this strategy that we're going to do is we're going to find out what is its length, what its width, and then write an equation that relates with this given area that has been provided to us. So in this example over here, your length is going to be 6 plus x, whereas your width is going to be 4 plus x. And then I'm going to substitute this into the formula length times width. So therefore, it's going to be x plus 6 x plus 4 is equal to 63. All I've done is just changed the order of this. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to expand this using the for method. So if I do this, this is what my equation will now look like. I'm trying to solve for x. So let's do this by trying to get one side equal to 0. So let's move the 63 over. So this is what your equation would now look like. I'm now going to use the product sum method to factorize this. So find two numbers multiplied with each other that gives you negative 239 but adds up to positive 10. That's going to be positive 13 and negative 3. And then use the null factor law. And in this example over here, you can't have a negative value at all. So therefore, x is going to be 3 centimeters. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys again in the next video. Bye.